Well, then the question is, New York just in the Democratic primary elected Zohran Mamdani. So, do you think that is the solution?
I hope he wins. I'm going to vote for him. And, it's interesting. Now, he's not, I mean, I have a nuanced take on it because
Mhm.
Democratic Socialists of America, and this will be of particular interest to your audience, I think. Democratic Socialists of America was formed in the late 70s, like 78, 79. It was originally the Democratic Socialist Organizing Committee. And what it was set up by the CIA. Michael Harrington, who was the founder, had worked at the U.S. State Department. Gloria Steinem, who was the voice of American feminism, has always bragged that the CIA made her what she is. Irving Howe was a Trotskyist intellectual who was funded by the CIA, Partisan Review magazine. He was like their Marxist intellectual who was anti-communist. And China's politics were really changing in those years. Deng Xiaoping had come to power, and there were millions of, I shouldn't say millions, but hundreds of thousands of Americans that were Maoist communists that had been in the new communist movement that were trying to form a new communist party. DSA was formed as China's politics were changing to deprogram and de-radicalize those people and bring them into the Democrat Party. And that's what happened. And they had In These Times magazine and their publications. They said that Leninism is un-American. Their teaching was that Leninism is undemocratic, etc. And they brought a lot of former Maoist communists into the Democrat Party. And that's why, like Fox News will talk about, oh, so and so is a Maoist, like Margaret Chin, who's on the city council here in New York, a Chinese American. She's on this New York City Council. She was the leader of the Communist Workers' Party of New York City. And now she's just a regular Democrat. She's pro-Israel even. She's not even in DSA. She's just a regular Democrat, but she was part of this. There were a number of Maoist communist groups that just kind of went into DSA and then went into the Democrat Party. Zoran, I mean, his mother is a very prominent Hollywood film director. His father is from Uganda. He grew up in Uganda. And in Uganda, there was a layer of people that were like pro-Soviet communists. But at the time the Soviet Union was falling, they pivoted towards social democracy. Like the African National Congress of South Africa was originally a communist group, right? SWAPO in Namibia. Most of Southern Africa, the big parties that were against colonialism were communist groups. But as the Soviet Union was falling, they pivoted towards the Labour Party of Britain and the Second International. And that's where Zoran comes from. That's why his middle name is Kwame. He's named after Kwame Nkrumah, the African communist leader of Ghana, right? And that's his background. And his family, they're quite wealthy. They're from this African country. They're Muslims, and they were in the Soviet sphere. And as the Soviet Union was falling, they were with like the Gorbachev faction that pivoted towards social democracy. And they have quite a bit of money. And his wife was very heavily involved in trying to bring down the Syrian government. His wife was an anti-Assad activist. I mean, he's from a really, really wealthy, prominent African family that are Muslim and all of that, and but he's pro-Palestine. And the thing is, the reason I support him is because it's not about him. It's because it's what he represents. He's a Muslim. He calls himself a socialist. And the faction in Trump's camp that is the worst faction is in New York City. It is the Zionist real estate owners, right? There's a whole lot of companies in New York City that own real estate that are actually headquartered in Israel. They're not Jews, they're Israelis, right? It's not that they're Jews, so please don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
And they are ruthless and they make money. And Xi Jinping has talked about how housing is for living in,
Yeah.
not for speculation. In New
Yes.
York City, the rent keeps going up and the amount of empty apartments keeps going up. Supply and demand is not working. And it's a ripoff because they gamble on the housing and they just make more and more money. And they're insanely pro-Israel. They hate Muslims with a passion. And Zoran scares the living hell out of them. He's like their living nightmare. He's a Muslim. He's a socialist. He's a brown guy. And it's like, I used to joke that, you could just take a picture of him and go to Central Park West, the expensive apartment buildings where all these like millionaires live, and just hold his picture and they would all go, ah, ah. They would like, I mean, he's just like their nightmare. And I feel like the mainstream of the Democratic Party, usually they wouldn't accept somebody like Zoran. They would say, well, he's not the real candidate. And Cuomo is going to run against him. And Cuomo will probably get the backing of the mainstream of the Democratic Party. But they're congratulating him, Chuck Schumer and others, because they're having fun with this. They are so angry at that ultra-Zionist real estate faction in the Democrat Party that is pushing us to war with Iran and has enabled Trump to be in power. They don't like Trump either.
Mhm.
So, I think that the Democrat Party is having fun. And this is also a threat. This is the Democrats saying, look, you really want to push this, right? We could let the socialism thing really take off if we wanted to. If you really want, you want to play, you've got your far right groups and your neo-Nazis and your militias. We can do the socialism thing if we really, and so it's that if you have a knife fight, right, and you have a knife, right, your opponent, then if he gets a gun, then you have to get a gun. It's kind of like that, right? So Zoran is a more extreme caricature to scare the right with. So